My name is Joseph Lynch. I am the artistic director of Babel Theatre, and we are a physical theatre company based here in Brixton, quite newly actually, so this is quite exciting for us to be working with Make It in Brixton and the Brixton project to do some wonderful things in the space in between. It is my great privilege to introduce you to Josephine, but before I do that, I would just like to say, at any point, if anyone wants to get up and go to the bathroom, if you want to grab some more food, if you need more wine, there's always wine left over from these events, so no one is going to berate you for topping yourself up. Please do feel like you can do that. We're going to keep it very informal. No one is going to mind if you go. And do whatever you need to do to feel happy and comfortable and safe. So yes, it really is my great privilege to introduce you to Josephine Namusisi Riley.
Thank you.
Riley,
Thank you.
the founder of White Allies. I met Josephine a few weeks ago, and in planning this event was very captivated by you and your personality and your passion, and particularly your story and the ideas that you left in me as well, that sat in me afterwards. And so this is kind of a moment for me to unpick some of those and hear a bit more about what you're doing, and also to share that with a wider group of people as well.
Great.
So I'll shut up. Maybe could you tell us a bit about you and who you are and how we got to having this conversation here today?
Great. Thank you, Joseph. And thank you, everybody, for coming. I'm Josephine, and I'm married to Winston over there. And we've got 3 kids, and I work for Citizens UK, which is a community organizing charity, and I run a mental health project, a maternal mental health project in Southwark. So that's my day job. I do a couple of other things, sitting on a wisdom board for a company called Brink, and I also sit on the board of trustees for the Maudsley charity. So that's me.
So let's talk a little bit about White Allies.
Yeah.
How did that come to be?
Okay, so White Allies came into being last year, like so many people, after the murder of George Floyd. I was stirred, and I was upset, and I was emotional. And I was thinking, why haven't my white friends checked on me? Randomly, I don't know why, but that's what I was thinking. And I felt so vulnerable. And I don't know whether it's because I'm a mother, and I've got 2 gigantic boys, teenagers, and I was seeing them under this man's knee. I don't know, but I went into a place of stillness and reflection and prayer, just thinking, how can this be going on? And what can I do about it? During that time, Black Lives Matter was in full swing, and it was really reassuring to see so many people out speaking up and demanding better. But I just never felt like I could do that. I didn't feel, even now, I don't feel that I have the right to demand equality or justice. I think, I come from a culture of being grateful. And so it just didn't translate to me. I couldn't go marching or, asking for anything. And therefore I was thinking, what could I do? And it was from that space, after about 2-3 months, that this idea came to me randomly when I was walking with a friend. It didn't come in that idea, but she shared a story that sparked the idea. And then I couldn't put it down. Do you want to hear the story?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, maybe a few people have already heard the story, but anyway. So, during lockdown, we couldn't walk, and I have this friend who lives around the corner from me, and we walk once a week around Brockwell Park, which is our local park where I live. And so when lockdown eased, we were like, shall we? Yeah, we're allowed to go out with one more person. So we arranged to go walking. The thing about that friend is that she's American and she's white. And I remember thinking, I don't want to talk about George Floyd. I don't want to talk about Black Lives Matter. I don't want to talk about Donald Trump. Because that was the hot topic at the time. And I just thought, I was still feeling so emotional that I didn't want to vent. So anyway, very early, we go 7 o'clock. And within 10 minutes, we were talking about these things. But I didn't have to say very much because my friend told me this story about her son. Our children, our oldest children, went to school together. So I know her children. And she told me this story about her son who was going to basketball on a Saturday morning, teenage, maybe 17, 18, quite late, overslept, very strict basketball coach, and he's running down Railton Road, 10 o'clock Saturday morning. And all of a sudden, a police car stops, and 2 police officers approach him. And he's a little bit startled, takes down his hood because he was wearing this oversized hood. You couldn't quite tell who was in the hood. So he took his hood down, and the police officer said, are you okay? Are you in any trouble? Is anyone chasing you? And my friend said her son was shocked, but it made her realize what her privilege was. Because 95% probably of her mates in football, basketball, they were black or brown. And he knew that their experience in that incident would have been different. So he felt that they were checking that he was okay, and that wouldn't have been the case. And it was, as you can tell, it's like a story you tell in 3 minutes. But it left such an impact on me. And a bit, maybe a week later, I was like, how about if we had more white people telling stories? Because part of my frustration was that even my friends would say, oh no, that's not what's going on, Josephine, if I shared my story. And that frustration made me sometimes not talk about it or not tell the stories, because I think, I can't be convincing you that this is what is going on, because I know that is what is going on. But I thought, if more, if you, Joseph, said, oh yeah, we were walking down the street, and people are much more likely to believe you. Mm-hmm. But I also had some other experience that made me think it was a good idea. And one of them was talking to a friend in this room today who said, that is a good idea. So that's where the idea came from.
Okay. So let's just hold that a moment, and let's just get a gauge of everyone in the room who here sort of understands what White Allies is. Just raise your hand if you have an idea of how it works and what it is. Yeah? Yeah, okay, so maybe could you just tell us a little bit about what that next step was and how it's manifested?
Yeah, so then I had to think about how I would collect those stories and the platform that I would use. And I came to the point thinking, maybe a website where people would submit stories anonymously. Because I was very conscious of people's well-being. And I know that for anyone putting their neck out to tell a story is something that is very challenging.
Sure.
And so I wanted people to feel safe. I didn't want people to be cancelled or, people to have to leave their name. So you leave an anonymous story, and it just goes on, and we give them numbers, and they're categorized in, social care, health care, relationships, education. So you find, so that you can easily navigate that. But that took a long time because I had to find someone to help me build the website.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
And it was launched on the anniversary of George Floyd's death,
Okay.
on the 25th of May.
Mm-hmm. How do you think having white people share their experiences of perceiving racism, or how they have privileged from racism, have an impact on society?
To be honest, I don't know, but I always feel that, I always felt that people really want to be seen, to be doing something. People want to do something. And like many things in life, I think that if you don't think about why you're doing something, it's easy to do it. You think, oh, well, I really don't feel like going out today, but my friends want me to go out, so I'll just go along. And with racism, I felt very strongly that people need to go within first and do the work within. That's why I have that analogy of digging the soil. It's like it just, if you put a flower in a pot, it ain't a garden, it's a nice pot. So I felt that by people reflecting and sharing or identifying a story and telling that story will help them to connect with this problem a bit better, so that there's that deeper level of connection. And then I thought that if people do that anyway, it would help lift the burden from us, because that is not me telling another story of yet another experience. So it would lift the burden, but it might also get them to think what else they can do. Think, how do I feel about this? And what do I want to do about it? So it's that work that you can't do through a policy, you can't do it through regulation, you can't do it through a procedure. You have to do it within you. And then when you implement something, it manifests in a different way. And it becomes a way of being, rather than you just being told what to do. That's what I think. I don't know. we will have to test it out and see.
We should maybe preface this evening by saying that neither Josephine nor I feel like we are experts in this, but just two people having a conversation, and that there is, maybe it's something we'll talk about later on, but there is perhaps a pressure to be an expert, to be learned in the discourses before we can even engage in the topic.
Yeah, that worries me often, because I think that in this culture, you talk about something, to have authority to talk about something, you must have read something, you have a qualification, training, whatever. And this is not it at all. Right. I'm just an ordinary woman that thought this is an idea.
To talk about something I see on my street every day.
So, and so I always worry that people will think, oh, she's started this initiative, so she knows how it's going to pan out and how it's going to work. No, but I think that I had to do something about it, because it just felt to me so powerful. Very simple, not easy. I really want to stress that I think it's a really difficult thing to ask white people to do. I'm not asking me. I'm asking someone else, and there's already lots of feelings of, I don't know how people feel, but some of my friends have shared how they feel shame, how they feel guilt, how they feel, that they haven't done enough. There's a lot of feelings, and while racism and those bad things when they happen to us, they affect us. I think they affect white people too, whether people realize that or not. Because if you sit in that space, are you comfortable with what's going on? And if not, why not? And you just need to go there. What do you think?
Well, I think there's two things there that I think that you've raised. The first one is I'm curious in hearing from you about the sense of responsibility. You were talking then about authority, and you have started this initiative, and now it is your responsibility to do it. And I'm interested in just hearing how that sits in you, and what that feels like. How does that? What is that feeling?
Oh, that's not an easy question.
No,
but the only answer I can think of is ask any parent in this room.
Right.
When you have a child, honestly, is there a bigger responsibility than having a child? And yet, once you've had that child, you have to just do it. You just do it by doing it. So that's how that responsibility sits with me. I feel like, I should have had a termination of white allies, but the minute I've brought it out, I just have to do it. Like, you know, if I had sat with it and not done something about it, I would probably, even my friends, I talk their ears off. Anybody I talk to about white allies, they're like, can you just stop now? It's like a parent having a child. All the time they think it's a show. Like, can you see they do this, they do that? That's how I feel. And so that responsibility, yes, I feel it, but then I would have felt much worse if I didn't do it. And I just, So that's how that feels. Like, ask any parent. That's how it feels.
And then I guess the second one was about shame, really. I think that was a really interesting point that you raised about shame. And shame is useful, right? It teaches us. When I am ashamed, it's normally because I've not met my own expectations. Or I've not met someone else's expectations, which I value.
Yeah.
I don't really know what my question is around that, but no, you just kind of raised it. I have like 20 other questions that I want to move on to.
I think this is things that people say to me. You know, when I remember sending out this email to a lot of people when I launched, like, white allies, this is what it's about. Actually, before I launched, I was like, how do you start a website that has no stories? Like, I had to badger everybody in my network, like, can you go and leave a story? Can you share this link to leave a story? But I structured a nice little email. And some of the most powerful things that came back was, Josephine, I'm so sorry you are having to do this work. I feel so bad that you're doing this work, but it feels so important. And I feel so ashamed that you're having to do it. So people were sharing how what I was asking them to do, how it was bringing up these feelings. And I can just imagine how they would feel. I was talking to my daughter about, privilege and all of these things. And I said, look, I think I know what it looks like because I'm married to somebody whose ancestors were taken from my people. And they took him to somewhere else. And now, if I want to go and look for the grave of my great, I can literally do that. I can go to Uganda and just find my people. If they're not there, there's somebody who is in my clan. And by being in my clan, we are related. So I can go and find my roots. And he can't. So I feel like I have a little bit of shame about it too. Like, how do your people do this to other people? And my daughter did not agree at all. He said, what are you talking about? It's not. But, that's how I experience it, and that's how I think that it could be affecting, racism and how it happens. That people might feel, a bit like that, even if they're not racist themselves. Does that make any sense at all?
There's a lot there.
Does it? Thank you.
But let's go to that place then that you were talking about of roots. I'm aware that we sit here now and being a Ugandan woman, you came from a country that's predominantly a black community. And so was there a moment that you first identified as a black woman?
At Heathrow?
At Heathrow.
No, that's not true. That's not true. I think that I went through the education system in Uganda, and I went to missionary schools, right? And the headmistress or, the priest, all these people were white.
Right.
And so, but then they were held in there's that dynamic still.
Sure.
And it's like, oh, well, they're here to help us and to educate us. But it never really dawned on me until I was in Heathrow Airport, and I was like, wow. And you know what? The education system in Uganda, you learn English, so I could speak English like I do now. But I felt like, wow, my tongue is about to fall out because I'm speaking so much English. And yet in Uganda, when I was at university, there were people from all sorts of different tribes and we used English, but it just never fell. So that's the same thing, like when I came and I realized, wow, the majority of people don't look like me.
Sure. And was that the same moment you started to encounter on a broader scale a sense of racism?
No, it was, right, when you first come here, I came as a visitor and you're not allowed to work. But like your mom is over there thinking, Josephine is in London. Like, I want to send her some money for her medication. Do you know what I mean? So I had to find a job. I was a chambermaid. I won't tell you the hotel. But, and I remember turning up and these women, bless them, they didn't realize where I was from. And they were talking about me in my language. I'm like, look at her with her big backside. It won't be there in 3 months because she'll have worked so hard. Anyway, but actually in that space, then I realized that we were all like this underclass of people that were cleaners, that there was not one white person there. And I don't think I thought it was racism then, but I thought, yeah, we're just, this is our life. This is how we are supposed to live. So it gave me that sense of maybe class or whatever it is that I thought, this is interesting. But I did the work, really, until I had to stop. But that was, so it wasn't racism. And the racism, you encounter that every day, people spitting and people doing that when they're driving past you. It's just normal. It was just normal. And I knew why. But then I thought, well, what can I do?
That was, what was that, 1990?
Yeah, 1991.
91. And then, so, White Allies is from my eyes, the latest venture in a long line of incredible work that you've been doing.
Yeah.
Maybe you could just talk about some of the other work that you've done before that.
Yeah, once I had permission to work, I went and I knocked on this door. It said, careers office. And I remember going in and this man, he was a good-sized man, and he was
A good-sized
smoking.
man.
Yeah, he was smoking, and the ashtray was this filled up. And he looked up through the smoke, and he said, "What do you want?" And I said, "I'm looking for a job." And he said, "Do you have any qualifications?" I said, "Well, I've got a degree in social sciences." And he put the light out on the Barking Road. Do you know Plasto?
Mm-hmm.
On the Barking Road. I don't think he had many people walking in that office saying, "I have a degree." And he put out the cigarette, and I did everything that man said. So I volunteered at the Citizens Advice Bureau, and I went to the City and East London College and did a course in welfare studies. And then the training for becoming an advisor was 6 months. So I did that, and then I started getting paid work. But at the time when I left Uganda, HIV was so bad, so bad, that I was constantly wanting to know more, to go to events, and eventually I got a job supporting people with HIV to live with the stigma. I ran support groups. I worked with healthcare professionals to help them understand how to meet the needs, especially of people of African background, and then worked with the people themselves to help them to access services. So I did that for a long time, about 16 years. And we did such a great job that I was made redundant. It's a good thing, right?
Yeah. We don't need you anymore.
And then I went and worked for a children's education charity called School Home Support, which was about really working in partnership with schools to support families where there were issues that were getting in the way of children's learning. So I did that for 7 years, and then I was made redundant again. And I thought, you know what, I turned 50 that year, and I was thinking, I'm never gonna just get another job, any other job. I'm gonna sit tight and wait for the right job to come along. And I went and did some manual work, and I was on the minimum wage for about 9 months until the job that I do now came along to work with this maternal mental health project. And I can honestly say it is my sole job. So I'm very lucky. But you know, it was enough. That's enough. But then White Allies came along, and here we are. I often don't look at myself as wanting to lead from the front. I always want to work in the back, supporting people, behind people. But this has thrust me into the eye of the camera. So, what can I say?
A lot, you can say a lot. Let's continue just talking about Uganda for a moment.
Okay, are you sure?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm curious, you're a mother.
Yeah.
You have 3 children.
Yes, I do.
2 boys and a girl. I'm curious about your experience of what you were talking about earlier, going through education in Uganda in a very different, like globally, in a very different world to where we are now.
Mm-hmm.
But also on a much smaller social level, the experience of going through education, of growing up in a country, and that in comparison to being the mother and seeing your children grow up here, and any observations you have, particularly about their mindset versus your mindset, the things that you were focused on versus what they're focused on the sort of day-to-day nuances.
You couldn't even compare those experiences, I don't think. So I was born on this tiny island in Lake Victoria. And I had to leave home by about 6 years old to continue going to school, because there wasn't there was like a little school, like maybe like a preschool with a few classes where my mother taught, but I had to go and move completely to my grandparents and then to the mainland boarding school to continue going to school. And my dad was a peasant farmer, and I mean, I use the word privilege, but it was a big privilege, because you had to pay school fees, and for us who didn't, have family near schools or whatever, we had to be in boarding school. And I remember my dad, he would disappear when I was supposed to go back to school, just because of the cash. Like, he had to give me the money for me to go to school. I couldn't just rock up. So, and then I'll be walking around the village going, have you seen my dad? Have you seen my dad? Before I jump on the bicycle or the journey to take me to, And sometimes going to school, the journey would take 3 days, because you had to get to the lake, and there had to be some form of transport to take you across. It was long. And so, but I also knew that that was my only chance. There was nothing else, because other girls were having babies already, and I was going to school. And so even in that situation, I felt like I had an advantage, and I just was a good girl. I just went until university. And if you'd have said to me, oh, there's a master's, you can do that, I would have probably done it, but I stopped. Having children here, well, it's completely different, because it's what is expected. If I didn't send my children to school, I'd be in trouble, right? Like, you have to do it, and it's not, it just didn't feel difficult. Therefore, my children, they see this as their right, and they also think that they can do anything that they want. And I've had to adjust my parenting style, because we tend to parent the way we were parented. But I know now the boys are like, I don't want to go to university. I'm like, it's fine. What do you want to do? Like, have you just said that to your son? Like, you shouldn't. You should be saying, go, go, go. But they have been to Uganda a few times and realized that children don't have pencils to write with. When they have a box, they can't even be bothered to sharpen the pencils. So it's a completely different way of being, and they have more of a right. They want to go to Black Lives Matter. It's their right to demand equality. They're British. They don't have the same mindset that I have.
They feel like they can demand that right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. They think it's ridiculous. My son told me a story, maybe last year. Lockdown, they're in school, they're supposed to be learning. He's like, Mommy, why do we go to school for 7 hours when I can do the work in 2 hours? One question. And then, we were just talking about school, and he said one day he was in class, and he goes to a good school. And in year 10, they were doing their art. I think it was art. And a group of black boys were put on one table. And the teacher said, I can't remember the rest of it, but what I remember is that the teacher said, you see that table there? They'll be serving me McDonald's in a couple of years. And my son got up and went to the head teacher's office immediately, like I wouldn't have. So that's their mindset. They're like, don't treat me like that. You have no right.
That's interesting.
And I was like, but why didn't you tell me back in year 10, you are in year 11. Why are you telling me? Because for him it was like, yeah, that's the thing I should have done, and I did it, and the teacher was gone. And that's the difference. They own it.
I've got like 1,000 more questions.
No, you can't.
Binky gave me the wave a moment ago.
Good.
But I do have one more just before we open it up to everyone here, which is there is a thing in society that the victim of discrimination is the one that has to do the work. Right? We see this everywhere. We see this particularly at the moment here in the UK right now with women and women safety, right? We see this everywhere, that women need to dress like this, walk like this, don't go home like this, do that, do that. When actually it's, how are you not going to attack someone today? What are you going to do not to put, you know, they're the actual questions. And so there is a sense with what you're doing with White Allies that is putting the work on the perpetrator, whether or not.
And most likely.
Yeah. The question is, what I want to know from you, what that feels like to have to do that.
What does it feel like? I think actually because I tried to speak up about racism before, and in institution and other places, and I didn't get very far because my voice was didn't carry the power. So I feel that as human beings, I can't imagine what it must be like to be to be white and to use the word black, brown, BAME, whatever. It's tough. And my approach really is to be, the word is gone out of my head now, but to give people the opportunity to do something without pointing the finger, because I believe in all our capacities to change. We've all been maybe intentionally or unintentionally racist at some stage. But that doesn't make us bad people. So it does feel like a responsibility, but I feel like the approach is I have compassion for the work and to the people that I'm asking to do the work. I don't want people it's bad enough already, and I don't want people to feel like it's a bad thing. I want people to feel like, okay, I can do this. Surely I can think about it, and I can share a story. And depending on how that experience is, I might talk to my children, or I might talk up in a meeting at work. And to give people that which we don't often in the society, I think, are not allowed to do. We are allowed, we're like, the race relation law, it's against the law to do this. It's, and you think, well, how do people feel about it? So I want the approach to be a human response rather than a stick. And so that makes it feel a bit easier. But every time I talk to people about it, I think, oh, what are they going to say? So I am nervous. I always get that kind of nervous feeling that, people might say to me, why do you think you can ask me to do that? And they're within their rights. And also, from black and brown people thinking, well, why are you giving white people more platform? Like they don't have enough already. But I just don't think 200 years, I don't know how long we've been fighting racism. We haven't cracked it yet. And I just think if we center white people, it's a bit like that example of sexism and women's safety. Yeah, we can give it visibility and whatever, but as parents, we need to raise our boys to understand that it is wrong to do that. We have to make sure that we are talking to the people within our networks to change the men so that the women can feel safe. So that's what I'm trying to do.
This metaphor of raising children is really interesting to me.
Mm-hmm. But you said it was the last question.
It is. It's the last question.
Go on then.
It's always the last question. This is more of a statement really. Because I imagine your eldest is 22?
Yeah.
22.
I'm looking in the room just in case she's here.
Do you feel like they are raised? Your work is done? They are an adult now? They can go?
The 22-year-old or the boys?
The 22-year-old. Are you done as a parent?
I honestly can say that I am.
You are?
I am.
Well, that kills the whole story.
No. But it doesn't mean that my work is done. What it means is that now I'm just like a backdrop.
Okay.
She just knows that mom is there. She can come to me, talk to me, ask any questions, take me out to lunch, that sort of thing. I don't,
she can support you now.
I don't ask, but
okay.
I feel like she knows when we're talking about white allies, she's like, but she's got an opinion about everything.
Okay.
And she says, Mommy, it's not us. You are talking to the wrong generation. It's people like you. I said, okay, So I think that I've given her enough to navigate life. I think the boys, maybe we still have a long way to go.
Still a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. Might take a bit longer than the girl.
Okay.
And maybe white allies one day, I will be at the graduation ceremony.
Yeah, maybe.
I'll be like, hey, yes, I can put it down.
It takes you out for lunch,
Maybe you'll take me out for lunch.
I'll take you out for lunch.
Okay.
Good. So I think we can open up the floor a little bit and stop really with my stupid questions. And so we have some space now to open the conversation out and for you to ask questions and for us to do a little bit of inquiry into what White Allies is and how it moves forwards as well, I think. So we'll start by just opening it up in a very general way. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask?
Or
Comments or any reflections on anything that they've just heard? Yeah, hi.
Hello. So the image that we get of Africa in the media, films, TV programs, whatever, it's always a very negative image, it seems. And we see it's either poverty or it's kind of people fighting. And I guess there is some truth. I mean, Africa is a big continent, so I guess there is some truth. But there's another, I was a volunteer. I lived in Nigeria for 2 years with VSO. You know that VSO. So basically, and I saw there's another Africa which is just people living their lives, and they go to work, and the children go to school. Yeah. But that's an image that we don't see.
No.
So why do we see this negative image? Is it deliberate? Is it trying to does it contribute to racism? Is it part of a strategy to kind of say that kind of African people are kind of inferior? What's going on?
I think that colonialism and this whole, slavery and colonial, that is all part of it. And I remember giving a talk at an HIV event where they were like, how can we support these black people? And there was this professor who showed images of children in Africa sitting on the floor eating dirt. And then I was the next speaker to talk about how you can help African people access services. And I said, that was me, and I've got all my fingers and toes. Thank you very much. Like, so what is wrong with playing in the dirt? Like what? Does that make us, because you've got some toys and lots of concrete? And I remember being really miffed. So I think there's an element of exploitation and the perpetuating of that. But as I said, I'm no expert at anything. That's just what I think. And even not a week ago, I met someone at a social event, and I talked about my work. They said, what do you do? And I told them what I did. And they said, I know the director. She's called Josephine. I'm like, and I had to tell her 3 times. Seriously. I was like, what do I need? And I'm not the director, I'm just a project like. But that's me. But she couldn't see beyond me to actually put those two things together when I told her my name is Josephine and I work. So you tell me, I mean, seriously.
Hi.
Josephine, I'm sitting there feeling guilty because I started writing a story for the White House website. It was like pulling a thread out of a scarf and then the whole scarf unravels, right? When I started to look at my history as a white French kid raised in posh suburb of Paris, it became layers and layers and layers of assumptions that I had not even been aware of. Right? So that's why I've been withholding this material.
Oh, now my stick is coming out.
That's right, so I'm here to get a beating, but I have actually a question on this. Is that, okay, I will post. And it suddenly meant that doing this has meant an internal process, because I come back to your point about, I suppose, about the heart is the place where change takes place primarily. I'm also Catholic by upbringing, right? I'm used to the confessional format. Should I be worried that once this is posted, the vote is out, it exonerates me, or is it a case of faith without works is sterile? And if that's the case, you know, what should I be doing if I want to be more than an apprentice white ally?
Mm-hmm.
Also, I just want to make brackets a point about our children, because it ended up being my white children who have used words to me such as white privilege. When it came from you, it was a novel concept, but when it came from them, it was double whammy, because I thought, wow, what a feedback am I getting from those white kids in Brixton. But my question is really, what do I do past the point where I post this material, which has helped me?
Can I ask you, is the material complete and you just won't press send?
It's almost there, yeah. Well, there's enough to make 4 or 5 of them anyways.
You see, the thing is, for me, that is so reassuring, because what you are saying is that what I thought would happen can happen if people go there. And that is the biggest part of the job. That is the biggest part of the job. Now, what you do beyond posting, only you can determine that, because you have to think about your networks, you have to think about the spaces where you occupy, where your privilege allows you certain things that maybe you might be aware of, or conversations happen, this is where, if you wanted, you would take it a step further. Because if something is unraveled in you, and it has helped you to understand and to see what your upbringing and your privilege, then it's within you. It's a bit like thinking, well, I care about the environment. I want to go to Paris. Should I drive or should I take the Eurostar? You can't just wake up in the morning and think. You have to think about it. And that is the plan. So only you will know which spaces where you can actually have an impact. As long as you understand that your voice is like so much more amplified than mine. I was talking to my boss the other day, and she was like, well, the stories are interesting, but they're not as powerful as Black people's stories. And I said, that you are just now hiding somewhere. Because I'm telling you now that if that woman did not share, my friend did not share that story, this work wouldn't be happening. So you, because you are privileged, think that your story is not important. Sorry, Binky.
No, I want very clearly finish that, but I think it's a hugely important point and very beautifully answered, which is straight back at you, really. It has unravelled, and so everyone's job is then to, I guess, and I just want to be clear that this is what you mean, is live in that space, which is always on a very uncomfortable edge, which is somewhere between guilt and awareness, so that you are always aware when you haven't done what you actually might be doing to keep that thread unraveling, and stopping the process by actually not engaging with it, but it's a little bit too uncomfortable and you want to put it down. I don't know, but
Yeah.
it's such an important point to raise, and one of the things that we've been talking to Josephine about is how do we make this, how do we make sure that people are going to write their testimony and then leave with that feeling that you have, which is slightly uncomfortable, because that's the powerful bit.
There is something to me about that, which is the temptation to produce the answer, right? The temptation to have done the thing and I've ticked the box and now my work is done. Yeah, I've done that sense of the work, and so I've completed it almost, which is why I was kind of poking at you for this idea of raising children, and that metaphor that you had kind of brought forwards. And I think there's something fascinating in the idea of maybe them being grown and you stepping back and watching them flourish. One of the things I observed in the height of the Black Lives Matter movement and being in the arts industry, there was so many institutions that were suddenly held to account for the sort of systemic problems that they had, and they panicked, and they produced a 10-point plan the day after and said, this is our plan, this is how we're tackling this issue. And then everyone was kind of posting hashtags and squares and these kinds of things, and which is all, the heart was there, but the kind of, what this is for me personally is a sense of inquiry, a sense of sitting in that moment and asking what it is, all of the time, and that it might be possible that you never actually post, I think. You are kind of always doing that work.
Yeah, because it's I only feel like I'm looking in a mirror, because when I was thinking, what can I do? I could have just gone to a Black Lives Matter march. I didn't. I sat and waited and just asked the question and think, what can I do? Until the right answer came to me. And only you have to be aware, but you have to make a commitment to be aware. And the answers will come. They will present. You will see them everywhere. And what you need to do, only you can decide if you want to do it or not. But those things, people talk about institutional racism, and you think, who makes up the institutions? It's not buildings, it's people. Like, people need to take individual responsibility for our contributions to the institutions that we belong to. Sorry, I sound a little bit preachy there.
But I think it's about, and you said this already, Josephine, it's about self-interrogation. Every time I feel I'm an aspiring white ally, I'm a beginner, but every time I feel like I don't know what to do, or I'll just post on your site and run away, that's it, I've done it. I find I can't do that because that thing, once your eyes are open, you can't shut them.
Yeah.
Sure.
You can shut them, but you can't metaphorically
Yeah.
shut them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like the grit and the oyster, or any other metaphor. You can't not. You can not, because we have this terrible and tremendous privilege that allows us not to, but actually I feel that once I've seen it, and I have seen it now, and I am working towards what I might do, but I'm certainly not going to do nothing. I can't do nothing anymore. And the parenting, I'm not a parent, but I'm a step-grandparent, and she was born on Monday. And you see this new life, this perfectly formed little body. And I, apart from thinking, we all began that once, I thought, well, I will do this for her. I mean, you were talking about the younger generations being much more aware than the older ones. She, I hope, will be enormously aware and very white ally. And maybe by then there'll be less need for white allies. But things will have progressed. But it's just there is this thing. I can't not see it now. So I don't know what I'm going to do. It's like you don't know what you're going to do. But you will do something. But you can't help it.
Thank you. I have two questions. I'll keep them really brief.
Oh my God.
I'm curious, on the website, do you have to be anonymous, or do you have an option to be anonymous? It strikes me that role models, white people who will put their name and even maybe their face to what they have to say, will give even more power, possibly. We can elaborate on that later. And my other question is, I'm sure I'm not the only parent here who has witnessed what happens at school as kids grow up. They start at 5 and 6 and their friends are every different colour, every different background you can possibly imagine. And as they grow up, they gravitate towards their separate groups. And it's so hard as a parent, because however much you want them to connect and mingle, and you do everything you can, and you make sure that they mix with your different friends and so on and so forth, in the end they have to become their own people. And how can we help our school kids and the pressures, the peer group pressures that they are under, not to say the wrong thing, hang out with the wrong people, da 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 da. It's excruciating what they have to navigate, and how can we help them? Because that's where the change, I feel, needs to happen as much as us.
You know what? Funnily, you should say that, because I've experienced at least 2 of my children. One had to let go of her white friends and then found her way back to some of them. The other one just said to me, Mommy, I'm just way safer with my white friend, so I'm going to hang out with my white friend. I think maybe he will also find his way back to his black mates. But those are the things, because they are aware. And actually, I think, especially for my daughter, that things were not adding up. The things that we were saying and talking about were not translating. She said to me, something dreadful happened, and my friends are talking about a dog on their Instagram. And I'm like, how can you be talking? So she's therefore making her own decisions about this friendship group that I was gifted with. Are these the people I want to hang out with? But now she's found her way back to some of them and is much more comfortable. So as long as we give our children the freedom to think and to be in touch with, you can read 100 books. You have to go back to you. And this is, for me, that's why I do this work a little bit more confidently, because I think somebody can tell me their opinion, but what do I think? How do I feel? And this is where I think the education that we have to give to our kids is their intuition. What feels right? And to give them permission to trust that intuition. Sorry. Something happens when you ask me questions like that.
That's something that, as Brixton Project, we have been looking at and thinking about and involving Joseph in another project, which is about doing exactly that for younger people of colour, is to find the space within themselves, which is before everybody's stereotypical image of you, before a whole set of expectations that belong to white people about who you should be, how you should behave, where you should be in this world. And I think that it's so nice to hear you say that, because I felt a bit like, have I just made all of this up? But I do think that helping young black people find that place is significantly important. One of the things that you've mentioned over and over again this evening is going within. It's all about going within. And I just really, I know you are a woman of faith, and that makes it with lots of people very differently. But I think what I'm connecting with is a very personal place of faith. So if you've got anything to share on that, Josephine,
From a perspective of faith,
from the perspective, I suppose, of a very personal space. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
To explain then.
the thing about it is that faith helps me. That's how I had community. I just didn't have any family here until I belonged to a faith community. But that personal place is, I don't know if you can really teach it to people, because I always rely on my intuition in my friendships, and I always rely on it. It's the compass. And I just don't think, often I meet people and I can't connect with them, and I think, why? Why? I can't actually connect with some people. Simple. But I've also found that some people, they have been raised to just not connect with themselves or let other people connect with them. When I talk to Joseph, he's got to be able to see me and connect with me. And if I have this wall where he can't really feel me, either because he thinks I'm going to judge or I'm scared, and I feel like it's a big piece of work for this society, I think, to just tap into that. And that if there was a school and education where they really allowed children to think, but what do you think? How does that make you feel? And what do you think is the right thing to do? Rather than saying, oh, you can't say that. We do that all the time as parents. That's wrong. But then we don't say, well, why do I say it's wrong? What do you think about it? The best thing I ever done with my children, with our children, is we have circle time. Circle time, it just revolutionized my life with my children, because I would say, you've got the pencil. What did you think about the Chinese meal I've just made? And we just listen to them and say, but what do you think that? It's the single most important thing, is allowing my children to think about what they think and how they feel and try and articulate it. But why? And not to make them feel bad. You know, I don't know, who knows? This jury is still out about what kind of people they are going to be, but I'm happy with what, because if I ask them something, they can articulate their feelings, and therefore they can make a choice about things.
Maybe
There
you
I
should
got
expand on what circle time is.
Circle time is just giving children from when they were really young the opportunity to just talk about things. We might talk about a meal I've cooked, we might talk about punishment. I say, today we're just going to tell Uncle Joseph, I've got a cousin called Joseph. It's his birthday and we're just going to tell him what he means to us. And everybody would just put their pennies in. And honestly, you can't believe the tears. It's ridiculous. But it's so beautiful. And so we talk about everything. We're like, is it too early to have a girlfriend at 14? What do you think? Try that another time. Oh, God.
Yeah,
Sorry,
okay.
Jack.
Kind of like continue the conversation you're saying, right? Kind of like food for thought. A lot of, when it comes to the topic of race, tends to intersect with class, gender, etc., etc. I wish I had such a time growing up. That would have been amazing. Didn't have any of that. But that, because intersected with elements of class and my parents not having, I guess, what's that term? Time luxury or time energy to give, unfortunately. Because of issues of class and because of issues of you need to make the money, blah, 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 this is that. And I was wondering, when it comes to the network or your platform, my allies, right? Have you realized or maybe seen through the anonymous tips,
Stories.
do you see issues of class and gender kind of rise to the surface when people are talking about their experiences around race regarding white individuals?
What an amazing question. I have no clue. I just have not really analyzed them in that way. Honestly, young people, they just get it. I don't know. I have not really. I've been slightly singular, I have to say. So I haven't, and somebody gave me a suggestion that we should get some experts to analyze some of the stories so that when people read the stories, there's some kind of advice or resource where they can go and say, this is what was going on and this is what you can do. And maybe then, but I need volunteers. I need some volunteers to help me do that. But I'm really sorry, I don't know.
It's probably healthy anyway.
But I will try and maybe.
But on that, inside White Allies as it exists now, there isn't, as far as I understand, there's no sort of data gathering from the people that submit stories. right?
There was some.
There was some.
Yeah, it
Okay.
didn't. When I initially collected the initial 80 stories that started, it was mainly women, very few men, and more younger people than older people. But you know, yeah, I did think about there's all this GDPR and why you collect people's data, and
Yeah.
I just haven't come to grips with it. Hi, Charlie.
I'm interested in the idea of experts, and I wonder who you think the experts might be.
Race relations? I don't know. There's an expert in every area, right? I don't know.
Yeah, there is, but you've been talking really beautifully about using your intuition.
Yeah.
That's not really a valued expertise. And I've seen over the last couple of years that kind of desire to have answers, and you talked about it as well, about reading books and stuff like that, when you can walk into any bookshop now and like you can become an expert in how to decolonise yourself by reading some books, but
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily get you anywhere, or you know, and then like Jeff has just said, then what the hell do you do when you're talking about intersectional issues where you
Yeah.
lay class on
Good
that
point.
and everything else? So what this isn't really a question, it's just an observation, but what I think is really beautiful about what you're doing is embracing and walking into that uncertainty, which I think is really powerful. And I was reading something the other day, it was a throwaway kind of comment, and it was to do with climate stuff, and someone positing the thought that wondering when people will realise that it's not the science and technology people that will affect change, and that it's the artists, because that's where you can get the shift in consciousness. And I think I wonder whether that's a similar thing with this, and whether for me I think it's the thing that's really beautiful, that it is stories.
Do you know though, I feel like I'm putting the brakes on, but I'm getting quite a lot of pressure for more answers, for what next. And I have to remind myself that I'm saying, you haven't been listening to me if you're asking me for the answer. You know, but I will have to find a way to articulate that. But as an initiative that we've kind of birthed, it is still in its infancy. There's not a lot of capacity for time. And I also want to get people together to talk about what is the best next thing to do for next steps. What do people really think would work? And rather than me, because I've done my work, most of it anyway.
Could I just interject? You talk about experts. I think the real experts are the people who are giving their stories.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that, I go back to a research or a paper that was done by the government about racism in Britain, and the outcome of that research, which was just pure hogwash. And these were experts. So that answers the question in a sense. The real experts are the people living the stories, and we should take our lead from those people, I think.
Totally agree. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi. I was going to say, on the experts, is we are all, as you say, it's the individuals who are the stories. But I think something like this, where there's a group of people together who have an opinion on something, so you're not coming to find reason why that person or that story, happened, or how that story appeared on the site. It's about a group of people kind of saying, this is how we look at it from a group perspective, not an individual perspective.
And there's also the idea, or I had that idea, that people that are maybe in denial, maybe they don't believe it, maybe, so when I do my podcast, when I get it right, I ask my guests, I'm like, have you been on the website? Which is the story that has struck you the most? Because you can't believe the number of people that say to me, I have never witnessed racism and I have never benefited from my privilege. And I go, okay. What do you say? Is that possible? Please tell me. Is it possible?
I think it's an illusion that a lot of people have. I mean, I'm Scottish, as you can hear. We've got this saying, we're all Tamsin's babes, which we love everyone. And there was a Black Lives Matter trail that happened, I think, in October last year, and a photographer took photos of sort of various artists of colour with a face mask with a sort of wax print fabric on their face, and they were put up in Dundee. And we had a couple of friends who had these portraits. They were put on these hoardings in Dundee, and they were torn down. And it's the only time that a poster has been torn down off those hoardings. And I was saying it to a friend of mine who is white as well and was a doctor in Dundee. She said, "No, but Scottish, that's just someone randomly doing that. Scotland's not racist." I was just sitting there going, really? So I don't know. I think that there is this illusion that people think, oh, no, we're fine.
But also,
they don't want to.
They don't. That is it. It is that you don't have to, actually. Why should you choose to? If you don't have to, why would you want to? Like, you can exist in your world and not be touched by any, and I understand that, but actually my challenge is this thing where almost everybody wants to say, no, I'm not racist, I'm anti-racist, and I just want to say, okay. Because everybody wants to be seen to be doing something, but really they're not. And that's why, come on Sunday, let's plant some seeds. Because people need to understand that you can't just say, I'm not racist because my son is black. Oh, the school is not racist because the chair is black. And it just makes me tired, beyond tired, so.
So would you like to just say, for people that don't know, what is happening on Sunday?
On Sunday? Oh, Binky, please help me.
Just one thing I wanted to say in the interim is there is a sort of, I think there's an axis between kind of peace or denial and peace, and I think that's the journey that you're asking people to go on. And that's a really fundamental journey. And it's around race, and it's around many other things I think Jack has pointed out here. But knowing where you are in any one of these in any one of these scenarios is perhaps the thing where you can plant your awareness in a moment, and then moving from that point. So to Sunday, which is
Where's your story? On the door before you, I'll be on the gate. No, I wanted to just say one last thing. That just before I launched, because I was trying to attach myself to somewhere, and I signed up to be RSA. What does it stand for? Help me. Society of Arts. And anyway, one random day, I was like, I'm just going to speak to the director of this place. Like, I've signed up, I'm a member, don't care. And luckily, I got a phone call with him. Anyway, so he facilitated this blog that I wrote. And then somebody reached out to me on LinkedIn saying, Josephine, thank you very much for challenging us through your blog. I've done a couple, so I wasn't sure which one. But I wanted to let you know that I'm starting this work called whiteallies.net. So, Angela, do you want to say a little bit more about that whiteallies.net? Honestly, it's like they came into my head and they stole my idea because apart from the stories is very me, but they're actually the answer to my players because it's an aspiring network of white allies who have regular events. I'll hand it over to you.
Josephine is very kindly handing this over to me. I've been to one meeting. They began, like so many of white people's awareness of racism after George Floyd's murder. So Adrian Locke, who began this, not York, his White Allies Network, began thinking about what to do, formed a network, and he has a steering group and you're on the
Council of Representatives?
Yes.
I think so. We're the bosses.
They are.
It's just completely like the flip, like that. I love
The
it.
steering group is white people. The council of, which we can't remember its name, reference.
Council of Reference, well done. I think it's something like that.
It's black people, so that this White Allies Network can refer to its council of reference and find out whether what they're doing.
I've only just joined. I haven't even been to a meeting, but I thought, why not?
But it is a group that has begun, and its first, I wasn't at its first meeting, I didn't even know about it then. I was looking for white allies online, and I found both you and them. I went to their second meeting, and they had agreed that the first thing they were going to do as a group was educate themselves about black history, specifically black British history, but possibly wider. So that's all I know, but I know that they exist, and that's why I'm here, because you rang them and said, would they send a representative? They said me. Yeah. And I've only been to one.
But
so
hey,
like a horrendous white mess.
But it's not. But it's a start. Just like White Allies here, which is a bit of a mess. But they're only in Streatham Hill, so they are local to us. But I think they do their events online.
Please bring them, all of them.
On Sundays. I will do my best to bring as many of them as I can.
You are already the expert.
No, I'm not. But if an expert is somebody who's learning about herself and how she will be involved, then I accept the title, but otherwise not.
I really appreciated what you said about being an apprentice, because it's a long journey.
Yes.
It's a long-term lifetime practice, and I think that is a positive thing. It's not something you think you are, but it is a practice.
I think there is the temptation arriving that we should find a summative ideal or idea to leave with. But actually, if we just go through the things that we've said, it's that there is no one clear thing, that there isn't necessarily a direct answer, that it is this inquiry and this idea of doing the work. and this idea of being an apprentice, I mean, what an idea to walk away with, that we are apprentices. And yet at the same time, you've said so many times tonight that you are not an expert. And yet I feel like we have learned so much from you, and you very much are an expert in your own life.
Yeah.
And we are, in essence, all experts in our own lives, no? And I think there is a sense of taking some ownership over that, of I am expert in my life, and as the expert in my life, I have a duty to kind of be expert at that and turn up and do
maybe an
that.
apprenticeship of your own life, because I feel like, you know, that's what, at least that's what I'm doing with White Allies. Like, let's just start and see what happens.
And so then there's this dichotomy between being the apprentice and the expert.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's a bit like being, I think, like being trained to be a Buddhist monk.
Sure.
But you're meant to kind of know it all.
You're meant to know it all, but you start again every day.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, for me, Josephine, you exert so much, a radical sense of empathy, and that is a massive learning experience for me, to be to think how I meet you and take that forwards with me. And so I would just like to say thank you and ask everyone here to just thank Josephine for coming here and doing her work with us tonight.